One of the Northern Territory's oldest cattle stations is undergoing a facelift. Cattle are making way for carbon farming on Henbury Station after the property was purchased last year by R.M. Williams Agricultural Holdings. Pastoralists say removing good land from food production in the name of science just doesn't stack up. But the new owners say it's just a deeply misunderstood project that could change the face of sustainable farming on the Rangelands.
For more than a century, cattle have had the run of the place at Henbury Station, but not for much longer. This 500,000 hectare property, 130 kilometres south of Alice Springs, is part of a bold new experiment in arid region land use.
Restoring land can be good business. Restoring land can be a market-based approach. It doesn't always have to simply rely on the philanthropic. It's also something where, in these new carbon markets, we can make the dollars add up.
So he came to us and said, look, how do we do this? Let's look at it together. The government recognises that we'd like to use you as a partner in this, and we're willing to help work with you to reach an end game. But the end game must be that this great project is shared with all of Australia and eventually is incorporated into the carbon farming initiative.
But the green idea has some in the pastoral community really seen red. They're worried that food security is being sacrificed and huge chunks of land are being taken away for a project that's not yet fully proven.
There's a lot of speculation and a lot of people who are very keen to make either a quick buck or a medium-term buck out of this industry. So we need to be mindful of the land itself, these regional economies, not just for today and tomorrow, but for the next generations, and make sure that the choices people make around land use don't see us moving away from food production into schemes which don't have any integrity.
It's a sentiment shared by the federal opposition, which has opposed the idea from the start.
This is an affront at the time to try and pacify agriculture. They pulled $9 million from somewhere, heaven knows where, to help a very large company buy a station to be locked up and actually do nothing. It is a front about trying to convince agriculture that carbon farming is good for them. It is a joke.
In some ways, the timing of the announcement couldn't have been worse for the Northern Territory cattle industry. Still reeling from the suspension of the all-important live trade to Indonesia, beef producers and exporters had hoped Canberra's largesse might be directed on more practical steps to help their businesses get back on track.
Oh, it was last year, about the same time we were dealing with the live export suspension, so it was a bit of a shock, but we had our minds on other things at the time. I remember that. But I do remember that all of our members from around the Alice Springs district were quite surprised and alarmed about it.
Tom Stockwell owned Sunday Creek Station near Daly Waters and worked for the Northern Territory Department of Primary Industries for 20 years. He's one of many producers deeply concerned about the implications of the buy-up.
There's all these things that sort of come in and they sort of challenge the status quo, and history would tell us in the pastoral zone that not a lot of them survive.
Carbon credits on Henbury will be generated mainly by destocking cattle and revegetating land.
You've got a station there where a whole lot of the ground cover, a whole lot of the effective carbon that would be within the soil has been run down through overgrazing over the years. And so simply by moving the livestock off, there's an immediate bounce back in terms of the quality of carbon stocks in the soil that happens there. So you get that, and then obviously there's significant land management that you have to do on top of that.
It's been a year since R.M. Williams took over Henbury Station from the Morton family, but just how the company is going to utilise the government's carbon farming initiative, introduced in August last year, is still not clear. The CFI allows producers to generate credits by storing carbon or reducing greenhouse gas emissions on the land. The credits are then sold to groups looking to offset emissions, like mining companies. But those familiar with Henbury say it's going to be a very tall order to generate credits in Central Australia's arid and unforgiving conditions.
Science will tell us that carbon sequestration in our northern soils is problematic at best. So we have to be careful not to sort of look to having an experiment running in every part of the country.
Well, it sounds to me like that argument's exactly why you'd need a demonstration project. Exactly why you'd need it. If the criticism coming forward is to say that we're not sure if it'd work, well, why should we leave it to chance for pastoralists making their own investment and trialling something to work out whether or not it'll work on their land? Isn't it better to have a situation where through government investments we've been able to assist in providing a giant red canvas where we can paint out and work out exactly how you would manage carbon stocks in a large property?
It's progress that's still in work, and by definition, learning by doing is what we will continue to do. And you can't build projects like this if they don't have flexibility, because if you draw lines in the sand that you can't cross, things can go wrong.
NT government advice obtained by the ABC suggests at least $78 million could be made in the first year after cattle are removed from Henbury. This is based on a carbon price of $25 per tonne. Many pastoralists argue those assumptions are heroic. Apart from Canberra's $9 million in seed funding, this is a gamble that RM Williams Holdings is taking on its own.
They hope, and we hope, that they're going to be able to use a methodology yet to be approved but coming under the Carbon Farming Initiative, and it'll provide an alternative income source for them. But it's voluntary, they'll be bearing the risk, it's their project.
How can a government throw $9 million of taxpayers' money into a station for the express purpose of lowering carbon emissions and then say, however, if it comes out and it turns out there are no carbon reductions, that is not our problem?
If RM Williams can't generate credits, it will have to find an alternative funding stream to pay for the ongoing management and conservation of the property. The cattle industry says if the scheme fails, fertile land will have been taken out of production and a portion of the pastoral community lost forever. Once declared a conservation reserve, it can't be converted back to a pastoral lease. Producers say that impacts socially and economically, with the potential for a decline in community, regional infrastructure and services.
And even though we're talking about very large areas, we're only talking about small numbers of people that are managing this country. There's certainly a fear about that, and I think it's a justifiable fear that you're taking resources away from regional communities. But every time you lose a bit of the pastoral estate, you lose some of the basis of your industry, so you're reducing your ability. And the other thing we need to consider, of course, is that there's increasing demand for food.
There's one ever-present threat to the entire project: bushfires. They raged across 60% of Central Australia last year, and almost half of Henbury was burnt out. The fires went on for months, releasing masses of carbon dioxide and other chemicals into the atmosphere. Potential carbon credits disappeared, leaving a black cloud over the project.
Trying to store carbon in an arid environment where the potential for dry matter growth and hence carbon accumulation is limited in the first place. And then you've got considerations of bushfires, which are a natural part of the environment.
David Pearce says Australia has got to start somewhere, and there's no better way to silence the critics than by conquering carbon farming in the desert.
This is Team Australia working through RM Williams on the ground to initiate a world-leading project that will become a template that can be shared, which will help the development of legislation and will eventually enable other people to participate in it as they wish. It is not a project that is mandated to destabilise agriculture.
They need to have some integrity They need to have some science and accounting behind them, which a couple of methodologies now do, so that we don't see perverse outcomes, where land that is good producing land goes out of production on the back of speculation.
There are always victims when price bubbles are caused by new industries that promise but don't deliver. There's a huge downside risk for this one. There could be a huge upside risk, but there certainly is the potential for it to be quite devastating.